I'm going to show you how to make my easy beginner sourdough bread in a loaf pan. Welcome y'all to Robin on the Farm. One of my very most popular recipes is my same-day beginner sourdough bread. That one's just a simple, uncomplicated sourdough bread that is fantastic for beginners because there's none of those stretch and folds. You can use unfed sourdough discard. You don't have to worry about timing your feedings. And you really don't have to worry about all those rules that you hear about with sourdough, because sourdough is really supposed to be easy. I've made sourdough and fresh milled flour breads and yeast breads and quick breads for more than 20 years. And sourdough is really one of the easiest. Even though people want you to think that it's really complicated, it's not. But one of the very most common questions that I get about that recipe is if you can use a loaf pan instead of a Dutch oven to make that bread. Because so many people are beginners and they don't necessarily have a Dutch oven. Dutch ovens are big and heavy and they're kind of expensive. So if you're a beginner to sourdough bread, you can use loaf pans instead of a Dutch oven and make really, really good sourdough bread. So that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how to make my really easy beginner sourdough recipe using 2 loaf pans. This is going to be the 2 loaf pan method to make sourdough bread. It's kind of like you're making a makeshift Dutch oven and it works just as well as a Dutch oven. So let me show you mine so you have an idea of what we're going to do. These are 2 loaf pans, one inverted on top of the other. Now mine are cast iron loaf pans, but yours do not have to be cast iron. They can just be your regular old non-stick loaf pans that you see everywhere. But I do love my cast iron loaf pans. So you're just gonna need 2 loaf pans and you just take one like this, turn it upside down on top of the other, and there you go. You have a really great little thing that works just as well as a Dutch oven for your beginner sourdough bread. So let's just get started on this really easy recipe. Now down in the description and on my website, robinonthefarm.com, I'm going to leave you the printable recipe for this easy same-day sourdough bread. I'm going to leave you this recipe in grams and in cups and spoons. Now when I made this recipe the first time and showed you how to make it in a Dutch oven, I made this recipe in grams. But today I'm going to show you how to make it using cups and spoons. Now, like I said, sourdough is really easy and it's really forgiving. And so it really doesn't need to be measured out exactly to the grams. Very forgiving, it's gonna work out. Now, to get started, you are gonna need some sourdough starter. If you don't have any sourdough starter yet, or you've really been struggling to make your own, on my website, I have my freeze-dried sourdough starter. This is my sourdough starter that I have maintained for years and years and years, and I freeze-dried it, and it's ready for you on my website. All you have to do is reconstitute it, and within 5 days, you'll be baking sourdough breads. A great thing with this recipe is you don't have to time your feedings. You don't have to have an active risen sourdough starter. You can use sourdough discard. When you're maintaining your sourdough starter, every 24 hours you want to feed your sourdough. And after a few hours, 5 or 6 hours, it will have risen. And that's usually when you want to use your sourdough starter to make sourdough breads. But for this recipe, you can use discard. You can use something that's risen, fallen, and sat there for a couple days. So that's what I'm doing today. I haven't fed this sourdough starter in probably 30 hours. And you can see that it rose and then it fell back down. And this is gonna work fantastically for this sourdough bread. So for this recipe, I want 3/4 of a cup of sourdough starter or sourdough discard. Now this can be room temperature or it can be fresh out of your refrigerator, nice and cold. This one's been sitting on my counter. But you can see what it looks like. I've kind of been bulking up on my sourdough starter because I'm gonna make some sourdough discard crackers later and I need a lot. So be watching for that recipe too. I'm gonna use 3/4 of a cup of sourdough starter and I'm gonna put it right on into my bowl. Okay, 3/4 of a cup. Now, if you wanna measure this in grams, then this is 165 grams of sourdough starter or discard. Now, after you have your sourdough discard or your starter in your bowl, now it's time for some water. You want to use room temperature water. Not warm, not too cool. Room temperature is perfect. So I'm gonna use 1 2/3 cups of this water. That's 400 grams. So just pour that right on in with your sourdough starter or discard. Now I'm just gonna take this spurtle and give this a really good mix. You want this to look kind of like milky water when it's all mixed together. You want it to be nice and smooth. This is just going to help you when you add your flour and your salt. It'll help it to incorporate in a little bit better, make mixing easier in just a minute. Now that I have that mixed together really well, it's already time to add our flour. Now I'm going to use 5 1/3 cups of flour. You can use all-purpose flour or you can use bread flour. I mix mine up. Sometimes it's bread flour, sometimes it's all-purpose flour, just kind of depending on what's easiest to get out of my pantry that day. But today I'm going to use bread flour. Bread flour has a little bit higher gluten content. Typically you'll get a little bit better bread out of bread flour, but if you have all-purpose flour, go ahead and use that. But I'm going to use 5 1/3 cups, which is 650 grams. I like to buy my flour in big 25-pound bags, and then I pour that entire bag in a 5-gallon bucket, and that bag fits perfectly in this 5-gallon bucket. And then I put those really cool gamma lids on top, just seals it up really nicely. Nothing will get into that while it's in my pantry. So that's what I recommend doing. If you buy your flours in bulk and you bake a lot, you'll get a way better deal on your flour. Okay, that's 5 1/3. Okay, that's all of our flour. Now, already the very last ingredient is salt. Sourdough bread's so easy because all you need is sourdough starter, flour, water, and salt, and that's it. So simple, so easy to make. I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of salt. That's 15 grams. Now, what I always say is make sure you pour your salt not over your bowl with all of your other ingredients, or you could really easily overpour your salt and totally ruin your recipe. This is my Redmond's real salt. This is my favorite salt for baking. This is a North American ancient fine pink sea salt. It's really good stuff, but you can definitely just use white iodized table salt, kosher salt, whatever you want to use. Any salt will work great. All right, those are all of our ingredients, 4 ingredients. Now I'm going to take my really cool Danish dough whisk. Whenever I'm making sourdough, I either use a spurtle or a Danish dough whisk. You can use either one of these interchangeably, but these are both really great for thick batters like sourdough. So now I'm just going to use this Danish dough whisk and I'm going to start mixing. Just going to mix this all around. This will probably take a minute or 2. Now another thing that you can do if this is a little bit too hard on your body is you can use a stand mixer like my KitchenAid back there. You can just get it mixed up really well just for a minute or 2 until all of your ingredients are incorporated. That's even easier, but sometimes it is easier to not have to get out your mixer. Making this by hand is easy too. I've just taken about a minute or 2 to give this a really good mix. Now this is what it looks like. Now you might think that it's too dry, but it's not. Don't add any water to this. Let me show you what mine looks like. This is a really kind of a shaggy dough. Now, once you get it mixed up as well as you can with your spurtle or your Danish dough whisk or whatever you're using, I like to go in with my hands. So I'm gonna go in and just flip this dough over, kind of squish it, and just try to get all of those dry patches of flour off the bottom of the bowl. Try to get it incorporated into a nice ball of dough. So this is exactly what you want your sourdough to look like. It's shaggy. It's not even, it's not pretty, it's not smooth, but this is perfect for your sourdough. So now it's time for the bulk ferment. So I'm going to cover this up with a piece of saran wrap so that it doesn't dry out during this bulk ferment. Now this bulk ferment can last anywhere from 3 to 12 hours. What you're looking for is for your dough to get expanded, puffy, bubbly, but the more important thing is that you let this work into your day. Sometimes I only let this go for 3 hours. The dough doesn't look much different, and that's okay. Sometimes I'll even let it go overnight. Sometimes it'll even go 14 hours, and that's okay too. So either way, make this work into your day. I think ideal is probably 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, but make it work for you. If you want to make this in the morning, bake it in the afternoon, be able to eat it for dinner, do that. But what you're looking for is for this to get expanded, puffy, bubbly, and I'll show you exactly what mine looks like and what you're looking for when mine is done bulk fermenting. I have this other batch going and it's been bulk fermenting for 8 hours, and you can see exactly what it looks like. It's bigger, it's puffy, it's expanded, it's a little bit bubbly looking, and look at this dough. What you want to do is you're going to pull up on a side, stretch it out, and pull it to the other side. This is essentially a stretch and fold, but it's just one easy step. So you're just going to work around your bowl, go around several times, pull up, it's nice and stretchy, and pull it to the other side. And what happens is your dough changes. This is developing the gluten. It goes from being very stretchy to very tight. And this will give you really good structure to your bread. And this is all it takes. Go around your bowl a few times, pull up, push it over, and there you go. You have a nice ball of dough. Now I'm going to let this sit on the countertop for another hour, and then it'll be time to bake this sourdough bread. After I did the shaping step, I let this dough sit on my countertop to rise for an hour. Now I'm ready to bake it. But if you're not quite ready to bake yours, another great option that you have is that you can throw this dough into the refrigerator for up to 3 days, which is so convenient if you want to make your dough ahead of time and bake it when you're ready for it and have fresh sourdough bread without all the work. That's a great thing to do. It's also great if you want a little bit more sour taste from your sourdough. The longer it's in the refrigerator, the more sour it's going to taste. So that's something to keep in mind. But I'm ready to bake this sourdough bread. Now I'm going to use the 2 loaf pan method. So I have my cast iron loaf pans. Cast iron is really my favorite because it doesn't have any of those coatings to get into our foods. Super healthy and natural. And I just put about a tablespoon of oil into my loaf pans, rub it all around with a paper towel, and you can see it's nice and greased up. It's shiny. Nothing sticks to these when you have the oil in there. But I'm going to use these, but you can use any loaf pans that you have. Okay, so what we're going to do is this. We're going to put one on top of the other just like this. And it's kind of like making your own little Dutch oven. And yes, it works just as well. And an added bonus is that you get your sourdough, instead of like a round bowl, you'll get it in the shape of a loaf, which I think is great. It's easier for slicing. Your slices are more uniform. They fit in the toaster, and sourdough bread that's toasted with some butter on top. Oh, that is so good. Okay, let's go ahead and get this into the loaf pan. So I like to use a dough sling. I think this is just really nice. I have one that I put on the bottom of my Dutch oven, and then I also use this one when I use my loaf pans. Now you can see that this doesn't fit perfectly, but that's okay. Gives a little bit of buffer between the bottom of the loaf pan and your bread, so it helps your bread not get quite so crunchy or brown. And when you get this loaf pan out of the oven, it's gonna be really hot, and you can really easily just pull your loaf out like this and not have to get burned, which I've done a few times. Okay, so I just put this dough sling right down into the bottom of my loaf pan, and then it's time to get this dough out. Okay, so you can see the dough. It's been sitting on my countertop for an hour since I shaped it. Now I'm just gonna get this dough out of here, just like this. And I'm just gonna kind of push the sides down, and look at that. It's already practically in the shape that I want it. So I'm not gonna handle this too much. In fact, you don't wanna handle it too much at all. I'm just gonna put this right on into my loaf pan, just make it fit on in there. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, homemade bread does not have to look perfect. The more rustic it looks, the better in my opinion. But there you go. You can see that it fits in there pretty well. Now I'm gonna use this bread lom. You can use a sharp knife or anything that you have, but you definitely wanna score your sourdough bread. And when you score it, you give it a natural release point so that your bread doesn't burst while it's baking in the oven. Because when you put it in the oven at a really high temperature, it's gonna rise really fast and it could just burst apart. So you want to score your bread. Now you can do just a really simple down the middle score. You can get creative, make flowers, whatever you wanna do, but I'm gonna be super simple. I'm not very creative myself. So I'm gonna go just right down the middle. You wanna go about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. And that's really all it is. I'll do a few little slashes in it. My daughter's really the creative one in our family, and I usually have her do this. But she's at tennis right now, so I guess I'll do it. And there we go. All right, now I'm gonna put the top on. I'm gonna flip this over or invert it on top. Just fit it together as best you can, and that's all there is to it. Now I haven't preheated my oven. I'm gonna do a cold bake. So I'm gonna put this into the oven and then turn it on to 450 degrees. I'm gonna set the timer for 45 minutes, let this bake. When the timer goes off, I'm gonna take this top off and I'm gonna leave it in the oven. And then I'm gonna lower the temperature to 425 degrees, and I'm gonna let it brown up for another 10 or 15 minutes. And I'll show you exactly what it should look like then. I'm excited for this easy sourdough bread. It's gonna be absolutely delicious. My sourdough bread has been baking at 450 degrees for 45 minutes, and now it's time to take the lid off. I love this part because we get to take a little peek at the bread before it's totally done. Look how gorgeous this looks. Now, I'm gonna let this go another 15 minutes. I'm gonna put it back in and lower the temperature to 425 degrees. I let this bake another 15 more minutes just to brown up and finish off. Look how gorgeous. A great way to know if your sourdough bread is totally cooked inside is to use a food thermometer. You want this to be about 200 to 205 degrees, and then you know that your bread is done. I like to get my bread out of the loaf pan immediately after getting it out of the oven. This will help your bread not to get too brown or crunchy, and it won't start getting kind of soggy sitting in the loaf pan. I love the dough sling because you can just lift it right on out, and look how good our sourdough bread looks. Now, you're gonna wanna let your sourdough cool. If you let it cool, all of that extra moisture will evaporate and you won't get a gummy sourdough before you cut into it. So let it cool and then we'll cut into it. My bread cooled before I was ready to slice into it, so I stored it in one of my beeswax bread bags. These beeswax bread bags keep your sourdough crust perfect. My daughters and I make them together and they're on my website. All right, I am ready to cut into this gorgeous sourdough bread. I'm using my bread bow knife. This is great for sourdough breads. Okay, let's check out the crumb. This is the moment of truth. Oh, it looks gorgeous. This has a nice tight crumb, but also those characteristic sourdough holes. I just think it looks great. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bite of this bread, but I love my sourdough bread toasted. So I'm gonna toast up a little piece. I love the heel. I'm gonna add some butter for a real treat. And then I'm gonna taste this bread. And that's the thing that matters. I don't really care what my bread looks like. I care about how it tastes. And this one tastes absolutely incredible. This is an easy same-day sourdough bread, perfect for beginners, and you get real good sourdough bread. I'm gonna leave the printable recipe down in the description and on my website, robinonthefarm.com. Print out this recipe, make this bread, and let me know what you think about it. These are our beeswax bread bags. They're a great alternative to plastic, and they're perfect for sourdough breads. Thanks so much for being here with me on Robin on the Farm. I hope you'll check out my other bread recipes, and I'll see you next time.
Robin's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make